Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Rogosin. I am an audio engineer and digital media producer. I got into recording and audio because I used to write my own music. And that led me to getting a 4-track recording machine, recording my own music, learning about multi-tracking and overdubbing. And I just fell in love with the process. So using my own musical ear, I help others create different types of recordings and expression, uh, approaching capturing music as a journalist as opposed to as like a studio recording engineer.
Do you mind if we just jump straight into some student questions?
Not at all.
Okay. So one of the kids wanted to know, can you describe some of the difficulties you've had in your career and then how you overcame those difficulties?
Sure. Um, I think when I first started, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. All I knew is I wanted to work in audio. So I ended up getting a job at the Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C., and I would run the soundboard. But I learned very quickly that after 8 shows a week, same thing every night, it got a little repetitive and boring. So it was important for me to sort of just open my eyes around me in Washington, D.C. to what else was going on. I used to walk by NPR's headquarters on my way to the Shakespeare Theater every day. I also checked a publication called Art Search, and the City Paper. And the City Paper of Washington, D.C. had listed, record congressional hearings on cassette tapes for transcription purposes. So I think how I overcame, you know, getting into a job that I felt was a little monotonous was to kind of just pound the pavement and really pay attention to what was going on around me.
Mm. So were there any challenges like you've done so many the Tiny Desk concerts? So in such an intimate setting, what kind of challenges were you faced with when dealing with those concerts?
Uh, a number of challenges. Number one is bleed. So, of course, all of the instruments, sometimes 15 musicians, are literally crammed into a tiny corner. So I have to deal with a lot of, drums getting into vocal mics and horns getting into vocal mics. So what I do to abate that is basically muting tons of things when they're not needed. So anytime a vocalist isn't singing, I'm muting, making edit points. If you look at one of my Pro Tools sessions, it's completely inundated with edit points where I'm muting all kinds of audio in order to get a little bit more isolation. And also just really riding all of those levels. The other issues that I run into is, musicians come in, they're like, what is this? Like David Crosby, he's like, I don't have in-ear monitors. What's going on? How am I possibly going to do this? So a lot of the challenges come with managing talent, and that's a huge part of the job beyond just the technical skills and having a good ear and mixing and knowing what sounds good to you. It's also managing the talent. So, in that instance, I say, Mr. Crosby, I'll be happy to give you a monitor. It's no problem. But, if you wouldn't mind terribly just singing through the first song with your band, see how it goes, see how it feels. Of course, they sang through the first song. There was rapturous applause, and they kept going, and it ended up working out great.
That is truly the memory of multiple lifetimes right there, I'm
Yes,
sure.
indeed.
So now when you're approaching sound for podcast versus sound for live music, is there a different approach or would you say it's the same?
I'd say it's very different. I think there's a certain intimacy with podcast production where uh, my goal when I'm sound designing a podcast is to, choose the right music bed, of course, but also really listen in to, how music comes in and how it evokes emotion without drawing too much attention to itself. So when we won the Pulitzer Prize for No Compromise, one of the things that the judges mentioned was that the sound design was super had a ton of personality, but not so much personality that it drew too much attention to itself, if that makes any kind of sense.
Absolutely, absolutely it does. And so out of all the projects that you worked on, I'm sure you get this question almost every day. Which is the your most favorite project that you worked on and why?
Wow. I would say probably going to West Africa and recording voodoo rituals and festivals. It was a collaboration with National Geographic and NPR called Radio Expeditions. And we went to West Africa. There were a handful of engineers that knew how to do the field recording. This was in 2004. So I'm reaching way back. And I remember the reporter, John Burnett, who I worked with in West Africa to produce these stories. He said, I don't know how you're going to top this. And I'm like, I don't know, man. But then, I did a whole career with Tiny Desk. Everybody say hi to Foggy Bottom. This is my dog.
It's a adorable, adorable dog. And one of the next questions that was emailed to me from the students, they want to know during your travels to places like Africa, you've been to Cambodia, Greece, to gather sound. Did these shape you or influence you in any way professionally when you came back to the States?
Yeah, big time. I mean, learning all those field sound gathering techniques, whether it's MS stereo, which is what the main stereo shotgun mic is at Tiny Desk. It's MS. It's a cardioid condenser and a bidirectional capsule, and you have to decode it. And it's got great stereo to mono compatibility, as well as the ability to adjust the stereo width in post-production. So I learned about MS stereo capture, binaural recording, which is more of an ambience bed, which I would use for audience mics at the Tiny Desk. I already talked about MS being a part of the the main shotgun mic that kind of lets in more of the band. Like I kind of embrace the bleed. Then of course there's ORTF, which is a French way of stereo recording with two cardioid condenser mics at 120-degree angle. That's how I would record all of like my piano, for example, behind the soundboard. So all these different sound gathering techniques I learned as a journalist, as a documentarian. I basically applied all of that to Tiny Desk. So I consider the sound design that I created for Tiny Desk is really capturing audio as a journalist rather than as a studio recording engineer. And then, of course, the post-production kind of turns into this hybrid. And I think that's what makes it so unique and special, in addition to having a live audience. So it's like I'm actually capturing a moment that would happen whether I was there or not, right? Of course, it's for the cameras, it's for the microphones, but it's also for the people in the room. It's just like a very real way to capture something. And there's a certain relationship that happens between the audience and the performers that can't just be made up because it's like journalism.
How have you seen, you mentioned 2004. So how have you seen the industry change with the introduction of all this technology and stuff like that?
Unfortunately, it's certainly in broadcasting and radio production, specifically at NPR, it has turned into producers and reporters doing the work that I used to do as an audio engineer, which I think stinks because I think the more people who are collaborating, the better the product will turn out. But because, I was recording on DAT tapes, with external microphone preamps, and it was pretty complicated. The technology evolved, of course, to these little flash-based recorders that you can fit in your pocket, plug in a shotgun mic with an electric condenser with a battery in it, plug in a passive RE20 dynamic mic directly into your recorder, and that's what the reporters do, and that's what the producers do. So there's no longer the attention to detail capturing super sound rich content because I think the news organization, and specifically NPR, has turned away from sort of human interest stories and is more interested in being like a 24/7, what's the election process like, what kind of wars are happening. Basically, I was at NPR in 2001 at 9/11, and basically from that point on, things got more serious. They wanted more journalists covering more news 24/7. And unfortunately, I think the craft and the art of storytelling has gone away in terms of the live broadcasts. And maybe some of that has been transitioned into podcasts. But podcast is different. It's more narration and interviews and music underneath. I think that the art and the craft of capturing sound as a journalist in the field has gone way downhill since I was fortunate enough to kind of capture the tail end of that.
So what would you say, we're going to wrap up in a little bit with a few more questions, but what would you say are some absolutely crucial skills if someone wants to go into this industry?
I think it's really just managing people. That's the most important. I mean, everybody can learn software. I think, having an ear, that's a tricky thing. I don't necessarily think you can learn it. I think maybe you need to get it from an early age. You've been listening to music, you've been exposed to music or just sound in general. So you kind of have a sense innately how to make things sound good. Um, but I think the most important skill you can have that you can learn is just to make it fun, to make it an experience where, hey, we're all here together to create something really special. If you have a talent who's a little bit like, I'm used to having auto tune on my voice. I remember when Post Malone came to the Tiny Desk, I'm like, look, man, I'm not putting any auto tune on your vocal. He's like, I know what you do, man. My voice is balls right now. I've been on tour, but I don't even care. Hand me another beer. So I don't know, it's just about having that positive attitude. And if something goes wrong, having the ability, if you're able to know what's wrong, right? So just like to understand that, like when Anderson Paak came with Free Nationals the second time, during the run through, everything sounded great. During the taping, the mic got pushed out of the way and I was getting more drums than Anderson vocal, and I knew how important it was. I let them play the rest of the song. I jumped up on the desk right after the song. Woo, oh my God, great job, everybody. That was incredible. Literally in the middle of the concert, the audio engineer is jumping on the desk as part of the energy in the room. Hey, that was great. Can you do me a huge favor? I think I need to get that microphone a little bit closer to Anderson. Would you mind doing it one more time? What do you think, audience? Do you want to hear it one more time? Oh my God, yes. Of course, they were dying to hear it again. And then when I got the mic in the right position, Anderson kicked it off with "Yes, Lord," which is his like his like whatever he says in the beginning of every like moment. So it ended up being that the second take that I enthusiastically had them do, the alternate way I could have handled that was let them finish the set after everyone's done and ready to go home. Hey, I actually need that last song one more time. Or I could have been like to the producer, right? I could have walked up to the producer, hey, you know what? I think I need that one more time. And then they would say, they wouldn't know what to do. Do I interrupt the show now? Do I let them finish the set? And then maybe we ask them to do it again at the end. But I captured the energy in the moment and just having that sense to stay in the moment but still get what you know you need. You need to be able to do that. And you need to know when something's wrong and what you're able to fix in post. I remember when Daniel Caesar and Her came, Her was super far off mic, but I knew I had the bi-directional capsule as well as the directional capsule for Daniel. So I just went through my mind, can I fix this? Can I fix this? Can I fix this? And I was able to solo the side capsule. And I'm like, okay, I have her on mic enough, even though she's way far from the front of the shotgun mic. She's like here, but I knew I had the side capsule. So she was sort of singing towards the side, and the front is here. So I don't know, there's just certain things that you need to know. If you need it again, if something messed up, if you forgot to hit record, you gotta stop. You gotta mention it. You got one chance to grab it, and you can't be bashful about what you need.
My absolute all-time favorite, though. Selfishly, I'm like T-Pain. That was like I couldn't believe. I was like, how did he even? It was amazing. It was a great job. Can we go with two more student questions before we let you go? Is
Yeah,
that
of
okay?
course.
Okay,
Yep.
so Lena in France, go ahead and unmute. You had a pretty good question because Josh did tell us that he was a former musician. So go ahead and unmute to ask, friend.
Hi, I was wondering if you need to play an instrument to become an audio engineer.
Great question. I don't think you need to play an instrument, but you just have to have an ear for music. You need to kind of innately understand where things should live. I mean, frankly, we're all just making it up. And what I do is I make things that I like and the way I like them to sound. If I'm listening to a guitarist and even, during the verse, the guitarist does a little lick that's kind of fun. I'll go in and actually accentuate that moment so it kind of pops out of the mix, even though there's vocals going on. And that's because I'm in tune to what all the musicians are doing. Thundercat does a crazy bass line during the Mac Miller Tiny Desk, and Mac's doing, a verse. I'll go in and boost it. If Superorganism is there and I've got 5 mics out, I'll create separate instances of those 5 mics and EQ them drastically different so that I can capture everything that you're seeing on screen by EQing it differently without, because I didn't have everything mic'd. I can create instances of a mic that's closest to, shoes clomping on the desk, a girl's water hand in a water swooshing around. I can EQ that same mic completely differently to accentuate the instrument that I want and pan it in the place. So I think it's all about just understanding about what sounds good to you. And if what sounds good to you makes sense to other people, it's all subjective.
Brilliant advice. We have our final student question. This is from Emma. She is in Europe, I believe. Emma, go ahead and ask. You had a good question.
Yes. What type of studies did you do after high school?
Studies after high school. Good question. I went to Ithaca College, which is upstate New York. They get a good communication school for like radio and broadcasting and television production, as well as a good theater school because I loved performing and I wanted to do sound reinforcement and learn all about that. They had a good science school. So basically, I combined all of the different classes that had to do with what I liked into my own major, I call it. So I majored in television and radio in the communication school, where I learned like multi-track recording, and I did a children's television show called Moosh News Corner, where I did all the sound post-production, and I was linking a beta videotape to a Pro Tools session, and like I'd move my cursor in the Pro Tools session, and the beta tape would shuttle around, and that's what we had to do back in the day. But basically, I took the physics of sound in the science school. I took the sound reinforcement class in the theater school. I took electroacoustic music in the music school because Ithaca was founded as a music school. So I kind of took all of the courses that I could that related to things that I wanted to pursue and created my own major in addition to the core curriculum that I had to take a number of courses for, which was television and radio in the communication school with a concentration in audio. And then I minored in theater.
Wonderful. So our final, I always ask this of all of our guests, as you know, because I did this last year with you, but what kind of advice would you have for these kids as they go off into the world and figure out what they want to do?
I think you should just pound the pavement, look around wherever you are. There's going to be something that interests you. Also, reach out to the people who are doing the work that you want to do and figure out how you can either set up a meeting to get advice or, intern with them. I remember for a number of years, I was doing Tiny Desk by myself for about 8 years. And anyone who would direct message me saying, "Hey, I want to come to Tiny Desk. Do you think I could hang out?" I would say, "Actually, I'm by myself, so you can come, but I'm putting you to work." And I would just literally make them do shit because I needed to get a massive amount of work done. And no, you're not going to just be able to hang out and do nothing and watch me. No. So that's my personal thing. And paying it forward, doing talks like this, talking to, the Berklee School of Music students in Valencia, Spain, going to NAM and doing a conference there, speaking at AES in Mexico City, AES in New York City, and other schools all around the world. If you guys could reach out to your schools and tell them, "Hey, we really ought to bring Josh in for a workshop." That's what I want to be doing now, paying it forward, telling y'all about my experience so that you can be inspired to create your own reality.
Brilliant advice. Pound the pavement, pay it forward. I love it. So before we let you go, before I end the meeting for all, I'll allow everyone to unmute at the same time. And can we all say thank you to Josh Rogosin, audio engineer, for taking time out of his valuable day to come talk to you guys. Thank you so much, Josh. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.